is a program that we started a year and a half ago that whose goal is to take retired scaffolding making and redirect it in large quantities to urban farms, school gardens, and community gardens and nonprofits all around the city. We're trying to do it in an efficient and manner, and be self-supporting. So we support the initiative by keeping it really low cost for us and by sales of the material. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about scaffolding lumber too. But the idea is to divert large quantities of material at once and keep the cost really low. So the next thing, so this year we did 57 tons, which is a lot of wood. It would feel like probably this room. And that is just a small percentage of the amount of material that an average scaffolding company throws away per year. And I'll tell you about why. So basically that's enough to build 1,200 raised beds that are 4x4. So probably if anybody here has urban farms that you work for, you may have received material from us. We work with Green Thumb and the city. And I would actually appreciate any insight you guys have after I'm done or in the middle I'll be presenting as to what it was like to work with material and stuff like that, because it's sort of like a trial program as well. Because we want to improve on the program as we go along. So don't hesitate to ask me any questions. So what is scaffolding lumber? Scaffolding lumber, you may have seen piles across the city that look like this. This is from the yard across the street from 3rd Ward. I don't know if anybody ever saw that place before it was there. It was about 10,000, probably 100,000 square feet of just boards like this, all rotten and stuff like that. Essentially useless, unfortunately. But scaffolding material is what's used on sidewalk bridge and scaffolding. It's 2x-dimensional lumber, OSHA plank it's also called. It's non-treated 2x10x12 high grade lumber.
It's locust wood, right?
What's that?
Isn't it a lot of it locust?
Actually, a lot of it's yellow pine. I have a bunch of samples I'm going to pass around. Locust would maybe be a little bit too expensive. So when we were thinking about this program, we were thinking, okay, there's all this scaffolding wood being thrown away. We saw these yards, we saw these things like, what can we do how can we save large quantities of this? Well, we can't do it by selling it because we're not going to be able to sell that much of it. The amount that's getting thrown away is way beyond what we can sell. So we're like, okay, we'll try to figure out how to give it away. So we're thinking, what's a use for it that you know you can move it quick. It's gonna be rotting anyway. A lot of it's halfway rotted anyway. Oh, you can use it for raised beds. Raised beds, as you probably all know, don't last that long. They're basically rotting, giving off CO2 anyway. So why not just divert the flow of all the stuff that's still good in these piles to raised beds, and then you can teach people how to rebuild them every year anyway, because you know you want to have that educational component to your farm. So so this sort of starts to get into my thing about sourcing. So when you want to source large quantities of material, you have to figure out first what you actually want, what is it actually made out of, and why are companies actually throwing it away. So for the example of scaffolding, the reason why, so what is it really? Well, it's yellow pine, it's hemlock, and it's blue lamb wood. Why do companies throw it away? Well, here's the thing, is that whenever you put up a scaffold, you have to, and you put up a scaffold, you put it up, it sits up there for 2 or 3 years, maybe more, maybe 10 years. Whenever you take it down, you have to literally go through and individually sort every single piece of wood that comes off of that scaffold for safety reasons and for OSHA regulation. So there's yards and yards and yards of guys taking a huge bundles of wood like this, looking at them, determining if they're good or bad, putting one in the good stack, putting one in the bad stack. The bad stack gets thrown away, and the good stack gets put back up on the scaffold. So I call that the scaffold cycle. So like a piece of wood be in circulation for approximately 10 years, about. From my determining, I think that each mid-sized scaffolding company throws away approximately 200 tons of lumber a year. which is a lot of weight. I mean, it's I think it's 2,500 pounds, 250,000 pounds. So that's a lot of weight, and it's a lot of material. And if that stuff goes into landfill and starts to biodegrade in the wrong way, then you're talking about a lot more CO2 that's going into the atmosphere than if it is being used. So we're talking about large quantity here. And also if you're going out and you're sourcing stuff, you want to know, how does a company generally dispose of its material? Well, it turns out a lot of different companies will dispose of materials in a lot of different sorts of ways. Certain companies use dumpsters, certain companies drive it to waste management. Certain companies, I even went to certain places where people were burning it. Like, each company is different, and when you're working in the waste industry in New York, commercial waste is all privately run. So you're dealing with a sort of disparate, you're not dealing with a city agency, you're dealing with disparate waste management systems. So there's actually, the answers to these questions are not the same for every single company. So just a little bit more about scaffold planking. Scaffold planking is high-grade wood. It has to be because people's lives are at stake walking on it. And there's very strict regulations as to the rings per inch. If it's not supposed to warp, so the slope of the grain has to be very straight. So you actually end up with a lot of really good quality wood. It's all regulated by OSHA, and each plank has markings on it that say exactly what it is. It's not treated, which is very important. I'm going to get back to that later. And that's another thing that you want to make sure when you're sourcing something in large quantity, that you really learn about the material that you are working with and do research on it.
If scaffolding is going to be outdoors, why don't they treat it?
Well, one thing is, and this is a really good question, I was trying to figure this out for the longest time because I had talked to all these companies about, why isn't this treated and don't you want it to last longer? First of all, treated lumber is much more expensive, and second of all, it's not as strong because the treating process, which is called dipping, actually changes the molecular structure of the piece of wood. So actually, it's not as strong if it's treated, and it lasts for a little bit longer, but it's not economically feasible for them to use all treated lumber. It costs about twice as much. So instead, they just sort it and throw it away.
And there wasn't any, I'm just thinking of all the bad things like that. Like if you were like, oh, can I have that lumber? And they're like, no, we can't give it to you because you might use it in building and it's imperfect, and then if it falls down and you got it from us, like, is there any of those issues?
Yes, there are issues like that. And I'm just about to go into that when I talk about going around and talking to different companies. You have to assure them that we're not going to use it for structural purposes, and also you have to take on the liability. And that's the thing. So you have to say, honestly, most of them are like, well, it's sort of varied as to who you're talking to. But I'm going to talk about that in a second. So anyway, scaffold planks are sweet. This is a sidewalk bridge. Sidewalk bridges are things that you see everywhere. Like you're probably one on this block. They're meant to protect from falling objects from on top of buildings. They'll sit around on site for 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, as many years as they are legally allowed to. It's a way actually for people who own buildings to get away with doing all kinds of illicit stuff. They basically hide stuff behind the sidewalk bridge. So the type of wood that's used in the sidewalk bridge is actually not the same as in scaffold. It's hemlock, and I'm going to go through all those in a second. So that's the sidewalk bridge. Very, very common. This is a scaffold. I mean, you can't really see that, but there's plenty of I'm sure everybody's seen it. So that's a lot of yellow pine. So the type of wood that you conventionally get, yellow pine, I'm going to pass them around. They're all labeled, so take a look. If you feel like it. They're kind of heavy. Maybe my sample's too big, I think. That's a new scaffold plank. That's what goes up on the buildings now. It has a big steel rod that goes to the end of it. It's southern yellow pine. I'm going to pass them up. This is 2-inch spruce. This is used for shoring. This is actually really good quality spruce material. This is hemlock. This is my personal favorite. This is used for sidewalk bridges. You can pass them around if you want, if you're not eating still. And this is yellow pine, which is best for gardens, in my opinion. Yellow pine, the top one, the second from the top one, in my opinion, is best for using outside in a sort of downcycled fashion. Yellow pine is really, really resinous and very oily. That's why they use it for scaffold planking when people are walking on it really, really up high. And it lasts outside for a really long time. And if you take a look at this, you can see what happens to it. It looks like a pretty weathered piece of wood on the outside. Take a look, but on the inside, I cut it up so you can see. So I'll pass it around. Pretty heavy, but I cleaned it up a little bit. So each one of these things has a different use, and they actually end up coming in different sorts of and levels of degradation. So you have hemlock, which is great for like furniture making, and that's primarily how we finance the program, is by selling the hemlock. It actually ends up being pretty, and it's pretty stable. You can look at from the rings on the end grain that it's actually got a lot of years on it. So it's actually a pretty nice material. And we'll talk about some uses in the future for that. And then the yellow pine we like to give away because it's really hard and it's got a couple more years on it outside. And again, if we have any comments on that from people who have used it, please let me know, because I want to try to make the program better. So those are the different types of wood. So this is just talking a little bit about how to source. The first thing is, of course, determining what material you need, and if people are throwing that sort of thing away. So, say you need steel, or say you need old tires, or say you need substrate if you're doing like aquaponics or something like that. So you have to do some research and figure out, okay, who has this stuff, who's throwing it away. Then you have to call everybody, and that's kind of the tough part, because you have to, you can't just appear like you want to take stuff for free. You also have to sort of offer them something in return. So a lot of times, if you're taking stuff that's essentially garbage to them, it's an advantage for them to give it to you, as long as it's not a liability for them. So a dumpster, if you think about it this way, a 30-yard dumpster, which is a common dumpster that's on the street, costs about $700 to throw away on a commercial garbage. So, I mean, it's not a lot for a big company, but it's a significant amount if it's in large quantity. So large quantity is advantageous for companies. Exactly. That's my next thing. Valuing the tax deduction is a difficult part, and you don't want to have them value it. You want to value it, because you don't want them to value it too high. You have to be aware of fraud. But being a 501c3 is really helpful. And if you aren't a 501c3 and you know somebody who is, try to work with them, because, or with me with Billy Green too. If anybody, saying it to a large group of people, but if people need help trying to source stuff, there's other nonprofits out there that are willing to try to work with you to help. Like, they can, for instance, if you wanted like a bunch of toilets or something like that for substrate, you could have them donate it to me. I would be a landing point, and then you could take it really quickly, and then it would really be no big deal. So basically, we all have to sort of come together to be able to take on large quantities of material if we're going to do that. And so I think things like that things like this talk are really important for things like that. So I went around to a lot of different scaffold companies looking for this material. I went to this place in the Bronx, and I was like, I'm looking for your scaffolding, and they're like, oh, I'm only going to give you garbage. I'm not going to give you anything good. And I was like, well, that's not very helpful. But they're like, come and look at my garbage. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to look at the garbage, and it's literally like a guy standing at a garbage can with in a field of ash. And it's like people just burning and like a bunch of smoldering embers, and they're like burning the rest of all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, so maybe we can't really work with these guys. And I went to this extra large scaffolding place in New Jersey this place called Safeway Scaffolding, and they probably throw away, they're the biggest scaffolding company in the country, and they probably throw away 3 dumpsters a week of stuff. And they had like overload of stuff, and they were in New Jersey, and it's not affordable for me to go out and pick it up from them, so I couldn't work with them. So I ended up working with this company called York Scaffold, that was in Long Island City, and they're really close to the Building Green Queens location. So basically we make an arrangement where instead of them loading up their trucks with garbage and going to waste management, they just bring it straight up to my location, and we have forklifts, and we have all of the sort of professional logistical equipment and stuff like that are at least somewhat professional logistical equipment, that we can unload and make everything financially efficient for them so that they're willing to donate on a large scale and whenever they want. So it's important to sort of hold your own when it comes to taking in donations so that you're not getting pushed around by large companies and you don't end up taking a bunch of stuff that you can't use and that you're going to have to pay to throw away. So that's a lesson that we learned over the course of getting a lot of garbage, and we probably had to throw away 2 or 3, I don't know, maybe 5 dumpsters worth of stuff. So this is the first example that we did with the scaffolding program, Brownsville Urban Farm. I don't know if anybody's representing them here, but really cool place. They were like the first large-scale farm that we did. We didn't actually do that much for them. They did a lot of the sorting and stuff themselves. We just sent over 4 containers of 30-yard containers of scaffolding lumber directly to them at their site, and they were able to go through Department of Sanitation to sort it and throw away all the extra stuff. So they ended up planing the material and using quite a bit, and they made a design where the planks are easy to replace, which is really important if anybody's going to use this material in the future for your farms. Make sure that you can replace the planks, make a post that's like a composite post that goes into the ground that's going to stay around for a while, and then you can replace the planks very easily in the next year. I mean, that's another thing we're sort of prototyping now, but I believe it could be helpful. And then the next group that so we started by sending containers, and then we got a forklift, and we started working with York, and we started taking in large quantities of material, and we realized that the only way to be financially efficient is to centralize all your distribution, all your sorting, and all your logistics, and basically make a place to pick up the material. So you have to operate essentially like a big company, a big business, in order to make giving things away financially efficient. So and not to mention that we're able to sell the material, which is lucky for us. Oh, that slide's gone. Oh yeah, green thumb. Then we started working with the city. I don't know if anybody here has worked with the city. It was an interesting situation to say the least, but we were able to disperse a lot more material. So we gave a lot of material to school gardens, gave a lot of kids the opportunity to use the material. We probably supplied to I think 25 public schools, and they'll probably and they have a renewing supply demand every year because they teach new kids how to do it every year. So the main challenges. This is my challenges slide. Dealing with rot and mold, avoiding flame retardants, and minimizing labor and disposal costs. All of that stuff takes participation from the supplier of the material. If you don't have a supplier who's participating with you and is on board with your project, then it's not even worth it because it just costs too much, especially in this sort of industry. So you basically have the people who are supplying the material are sorting it anyway. So you have to have them sort out the not super good, not super bad stuff, and you have to have them package it tightly. You have to make sure that they don't put anything that they know when they use flame retardants, and they know when they used when they were pouring concrete on it, or when they were doing welding, or whenever they were doing stuff that you may not want on the wood on that site. So they have to know exactly what you're doing with the material, and they have to be willing to sort that out and to use their labor. And so if you're saving a company large amounts of money on disposal costs, then it's advantageous for them to help you. So front-end participation from your supplier, and then in terms of stopping mold and keeping the material stable, you have to sort it. We sort it with our training groups whenever we can. So we have to sticker and sort it, and then being able to again centralize distribution and operate on a large scale has made it financially sustainable for us. So then this is just the last phase of trying to figure out ways to expand the program. Basically, one of the ways is trying to figure out how to sell the material on a really large scale. We sell a lot of it, but how to sort and sell for a cheaper, as an alternative to a 2x10 that you buy at Home Depot for shelving, things like that. That people buy consumer grade lumber that's not even as good as this stuff for way more money all the time, so that's kind of like a marketing thing. We're looking at trying to figure out how to do millwork and flooring with the material. Hemlock is often used for flooring, even though it's a softwood. And then we're looking at doing products and work training grants and all that sort of stuff. So if anybody has any ideas for that, or any organizations that you work for that would be interested, please contact me about it. And then we also, maybe we're thinking about doing a biomass generator. I don't know if anybody has any expertise in biomass power generation, but please, if you have one of these and you want to donate it, please. And that's the end. So does anybody have any questions?